Hi again, YouTube. This is extremewirehead for another Cardfight Vanguard clan intro. In this clan intro, I want to look at Aqua Force. This is the first Magallanica clan I'm looking into, and of the water clans, this is the one that everyone remembers. Aqua Force is very much a clan of admirals. It is a clan of sea animals banding together into some sort of tidal fleet, and they go and break face with multiple attacks. That is their main gimmick. In many ways, Aqua Force is a incredibly offensive clan with a gigantic gameplay at the G2 and G1 game. They play around activating skills by having waves of attacks. And a lot of their effects actually require a good deal of rearguards, but not too many. Because of this and a number of different reasons, it is a powerful clan with an incredible endgame and probably some of the best G2 support in the game. You will run into a lot of trouble with learning about how to play out the early game and when not to and when you should rush, but otherwise it is not too difficult to learn, and sometimes the correct choice is to avoid the rush altogether. Anyway, that's Aqua Force and short intro to what they are. Let's go look at the cards. I'm looking at the first card from the G4 list, which is Tidal Bore. Tidal Bore skill is when it hits the Vanguard, and if it's the third battle of that turn or more, draw a card, choose one card from your hand, call it to R. Tidal Bore is a very interesting card because it requires a couple of things that make it very awkward. First of all, it requires that you are at the third attack of the battle. This is a bit awkward, considering that the third attack is usually the last in many other clans. This is not so in Aqua Force. In many ways, they can go up to 5, maybe even 6 attacks, depending on the combo that you're using. Because of this, it's not too bad. The problem becomes the follow-up of the skill. You do get to draw a card for your trouble, but your drawn card is actually created an opportunity to call a card. Because you call a card on top of drawing a card, you don't actually gain a card advantage per se. You technically still have it because it is on the field, but if you're up against a clans, let's say Kagero or other ones that can stop you in your tracks because of this called card, it is not so great. This is an okay card, and it is actually even, you could say, a great card depending on the matchup, but it is not a card that you want to run too many copies of because of the number of clans that can actually take advantage of the weaknesses in its strategy. It is still a decent card and one that lets you cycle out cards while adding to your field, which is decent, so I can't really discount it, but you have to be very careful on how you use it. The next and last G4 that I want to look at is, of course, Marine General of Heavenly Silk, Lambros. Lambros is the card that really, I think, put Aqua Force up there in the stride generation. It is a card that created the entire strategy for which they were built around. Other cards such as the old Pavroth combos and many of the Genovius chain skills owe their allegiance to the style of this card. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, if it is the fourth battle of that turn or more, you may pay the cost, which is to face up another copy of Lambros. If you do, choose 2 of your rear guards and stand them. If the number of face-up cards in your G-zone is 2 or more, the unit stand with this effect get 10,000 power until end of turn, making them reasonably a powerhouse all unto themselves. Lambros is very interesting for a number of reasons. First and foremost, it means that your endgame is definitely going to be at least 6 attacks. Making it 6 attacks makes it a very dangerous thing because though that number of attacks is very, very difficult to shrug off, it is very powerful, and in many instances, you're going to be running into a situation where you just die because the number of attacks is just too many. On the other hand, a lot of people have figured out, especially the good Aqua Force players, Lambros is actually a somewhat decent first stride. This is because sometimes you don't need all that super powered attacks. Sometimes you just need 6 attacks without any strings attached. By making your rear guard stand a second time, you can even stand the same lane to add for a 5th attack instead of 6. The number of combos are very, very wide, and because of this, you could actually push them early game while keeping an extra copy of Lambros for the endgame. Very decent, very powerful, and incredibly toolboxy. You've got a card that really sets the standard for how good Aqua Force strides need to be to keep up. Going to the G3, we're going to, of course, look at the stride first. One who surpasses the storm, Thavas. Thavas' skill is, if it is the 4th battle of that turn or more, this unit gets a crit, and your opponent cannot call G0s from hand. This skill is really, really strong, but since it's a strider, you're never going to see it. It is nice, though, that you can use a card that basically stops them from calling zeros, but it's going to be a rare occurrence when you reach that point. The real skill is when you stride, choose one of your vanguards until end of turn. It gets, when this unit attacks, if it's the 4th battle, your opponent must retire or rearguard. This is of their choice. It has no cost other than requiring the 4th battle of that turn. And you will be running into 3rd and 4th battle if you play Aqua Force properly. Because of this, it's actually a somewhat free retire and makes it very, very easy to get to that. Thavas is a great card for learning how to navigate the number of strategies that you're going to have to run. Clearing out your deck list, trying to make it so that it doesn't matter which combo is in your hand, you can get up to those 4 attacks. Once you get up to those 4 attacks, you get the free retire. Great card, lots of sustain, and an incredible end game because of that last of skill. We're going a little bit far back to some of the older cards that you might think are kind of crap, but do teach you some good lessons about the clan. Cobalt Wave Dragon. Cobalt Wave, it never really got into mainstream. He wasn't that great back then. I don't think he's that great right now. But I really like his skill because it is very, very devastating if it does hit. Limit Break. When your rearguards attack a Vanguard, if it is the 3rd battle of that turn or more, this unit gets 2,000 and a crit until end of turn. This is potentially not great. You are looking at a card that only gets an additional 2,000 power, but when you get up to the 5, maybe even 6 attacks, you are talking about a card that suddenly became 4 crit and can insta-kill a person straight from 0. Really, really powerful when you think about it. And when it attacks the Vanguard, if it is the 4th battle or more, it even gets a 5,000, making it a 15 base. The number of ways that you could make such crazy, crazy plays with this card is quite large. Whether you're going to pull it off, you're probably going to get stopped by a perfect guard, is, of course, a huge, huge setback to the way that the clan operates. But Cobalt Wave really does set the standard. You have a card that just slowly gets stronger the more attacks that you pull off. It doesn't matter really that they hit. It's the fact that the number of attacks is what happens. The fact that it hits would be a gigantic bonus, but you'll see the problems later on when I talk about it. Finally, we're looking at Tri-Stinger Dragon. Tri-Stinger Dragon is one of those old Aqua Force cards that made a name for itself for being a card that won a championship by itself, which is kind of strange. Limit Break. When this unit's attack hits a Vanguard, if it is the 3rd battle of that turn or more, choose 2 of your cards from the damage zone and turn them face up. It is a limit break that pays for itself in its costing. Counterblast 2, choose one of your rear guards and that unit gets 3,000 power. This skill was never really used in the combo. What made it important was it activated the skills of a lot of many supports, while letting it hit actually activated his skill, allowing you to make all of these supports use their skills far, far longer than they really should have. This card has a huge defensive ability and allows you to play around their strength and make it even stronger. Tri-Stinger Dragon is a card that takes a lot of skill to play. It is going to involve a lot of very strange card choices, a lot of powerful picks, but I think it's still a somewhat decent card. Not so much nowadays, but it is, even if we were talking about just a bunch of G3s, I think it's still something to look into. We are moving on to the G2, and I can't talk about the G2 without talking about the main game plan. Aqua Force is all about the G2 because this is where the magic happens. This is how you're going to get those multiple attacks, how you're going to get all these fancy plays and make these things happen in all sorts of strange and wonderful ways. First and foremost, I need to talk about Rising Ripple Pavroth. I mentioned him a while ago, but I have to mention him again for brevity. When this unit's attack hits a Vanguard, if you have the complete combination of Soterio in your soul, choose one of your Aqua Force rearguards, stand it, and that gets 3000 power. This does not require GB, does not require CB. It happens on the G2 turn. And this free stand can mean the difference because you are attacking at a point where they don't really have the ability to guard that much. The G2 game of Aqua Force is very, very strong. It is far and away one of the strongest in the game. Being able to push them really hard when they don't have any cards in hand and have no ability to get more until they hit their G3 makes them very dangerous. This card shows that if you are willing to sacrifice the units early, put them out there, try to get them on your side of the field, you will be benefited with an additional attack that could very well kill an extra rearguard super early. The next G2 I want to look at is Basil. Basil isn't played anymore, the Storm Riders in general anyway, but this is one of the old strategies that they used to have to try and get the multiple attacks off. Storm Rider Basil skill is, if it is the first battle of that turn and he attacks, this unit gets an additional 2000 power, and at the closing step of that battle, choose another rear guard in the same unit as the same column as this unit and exchange positions with that unit. This meant that the rear guard on the boosting side could actually benefit by attacking a second time. Basil skill is obviously a one-off. You have to be the first attacker, so you can't really have two Basils. But it does mean you can actually have two G2s on the same lane and the combo still works. This means that before the Vanguard even attacks, you can get two attacks off. Many of the skills involve the Vanguard attacking on their third turn, so this was a very, very simple activator. You ran 4 copies just because you needed one of them to show up every game and activate it. He isn't so much used anymore because he does require that he be the first attack, even though it's not that high. But at least you can understand the reasoning that came with Basil and how these combos kind of meshed into creating such an awesome way of playing. The next G2 I want to look at is the famous, or maybe infamous card, Tidal Assault. Tidal Assault skill is probably one of the most annoying. At the end of the battle that this unit attacked the Vanguard, if you have an Aqua Force Vanguard, stand this unit gets minus 5000 power. It gets a free stand on the requirement that it loses power. This means that it turns into a 4000, not that great. But because of the number of power boosts that you can get from other cards, the number of abilities you can get from other cards, the effects that can happen, and the sheer fact that you can increase the number of attacks just by having a single card around, made him an all-around play. There is a reason why Bushiroad did once think to ban this card, because it has way too much utility. Every single Aqua Force deck uses it, and it's still a card that runs a lot of money and a lot of people to tears just because of how quickly it can burst people down. It is effective in the early to late game because of its lack of requirements, and can make or break the game just because of the number of copies that you get. Great card. Thankfully, it can only be done once per turn, but it's still a dangerous card to be holding, especially with a Lambros turn. And that's the G2. The G2 has a lot of pieces that I didn't mention, but Aqua Force in general focuses very heavily on this G2. The G2 are your main attackers. They're how you're going to get to your third and fourth and fifth attack, and they are the people who will get you into those situations. You have to watch this out, especially when you're deck building. The next card I want to look at is another switcher. Another, not really switcher so much as teaches you a bit more. Mercenary Brave Shooter. When this unit attacks, if you have a Vanguard and the number of rested rear guards you have is 2 or less, including itself, it gets 3000 power. This is probably the card that kind of makes it a bit awkward for Aqua Force. It goes very well with effects such as Basil. It actually works quite well by itself, but it requires that it be the first or the second in attack. This means that you're going to have to time it so that this is the first or second attack. Otherwise, it is just a vanilla, and those are not so great, especially for a 7k. Still important to note because this used to be played quite heavily because of its 10k power, and it's still something to watch out for because numbers of attack and being able to get these power boosts without having to attack the Vanguard is still rather powerful. Finally, we're moving to the last G1 that I want to look at. Battle Siren Stasia, whatever you want to say. GB1 skill, the only one that I've shown besides the Striders and Strides. During your turn, this unit can attack from the back row. And when this attacks from the back row, this unit has an additional 3,000 power, making it a 9,000 until end of battle. This means that you have a card that can pick out the rearguards of your opponent quite easily, can play to the strength of the Aqua Force clan by having additional attacks and pushing through. Even if you don't need the extra attack, it is a good activator for a lot of the skills. And because of that reason, Stasia does not even conflict with itself because it can do so in the back row. All of these combos put together to make a card that is very, very good and has almost the same amount of freedom of expression as Tidal Assault. A great card to look into and one that's only a common, so it's quite easy to find. The last card is one that I think Bushiroad never expected was going to be somewhat overpowered. The starter Bubble Edge Draco Kid. Draco Kid's skill is for every attack after the third attack that you do on the Vanguard, or on any unit really. When it goes into the soul, you may pay the cost of the skill, which is choose a unit, whether it be Vanguard or Rearguard. If it attacks on the fourth or more battle, draw a card. This does not say once per turn, so if you can use the same unit, such as with Tidal Assault, and get an attack on the fourth, fifth, and sixth battle, you draw 3 cards. This meant that you had a card that suddenly bursted from one card -1 into a +2, +3, +4. Very powerful, very dangerous, and something to see. It is probably one of those sure kill starters and something that I think everyone should have on their back pocket even if they choose not to use it. A very good card, and I think one that really shows off Aqua Force. Aqua Force in general is a great clan. It has one of the strongest G1 and G2 plays, making for a very powerful rush early game. It is a clan with many pieces that play many different roles and combinations that push the opponent very hard through multiple waves. They even have a sub-type skill about these number of attacks. But their greatest weakness, and something you're going to have to deal with, especially when you're facing them, is the fact that once you understand how Aqua Force works, their attack strategy and the order in which they do these attacks is going to be very easy to spot. The number and the order in which these attacks show up become very, very easy to see. Before the battle phase, all of your pieces have to be in place before you start, so your opponent will actually be able to tell what will be your strategy and in what order you're going to play these cards out. This is going to be your greatest weakness. Against a veteran player, they're going to know which one is attack 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And knowing these numbers and knowing this order is going to be your biggest weakness. Because they know exactly what they're getting themselves into, they can position themselves to try and minimize the damage. This, of course, does not mean that they have the magic cure-all to get away from anything that you do. But it is still notable because of the sheer amount of information shown to your opponent and how easily accessible it is. Like many of the other clans that I've been talking about recently, this is a clan that has a difficulty of keeping themselves alive when it comes to clans that like to kill off rearguards or lock rearguards. It is a clan that requires your entire field and will take up a lot of resources. Because of that, you don't really tend to defend yourself too much, and it is a very all-out attack kind of clan. It is a rusher, for certain. And the only way they're going to be able to maintain this advantage by rushing is being able to defend their rearguards. Their rearguards are their lifeblood. If their Vanguard was all by itself, it actually couldn't even activate its skills. Because of this and many other reasons, you're going to want to remove a lot of their greater high priority threats on the rearguard to siphon the life out of the clan. In that way, you then just turn into the luck of the draw because you've got nothing left, and hopefully draw into the cards that you need, or you have a backup plan. Because of this and many other reasons, Aqua Force is a medium tier to high tier clan with a lot of technical abilities, a lot of strengths, but because of the lack of defensive capabilities, it is a clan that you have to be very wary of when learning. Lambros, I think, is definitely the most expensive part. It is the card that I don't think you can live without right now, and maybe even up to the future when this list becomes outdated. It is still a card that I think will have a lot of sustain and something that you're going to have to look for. When going up against them, you have to watch out for what cards you see, because if you see one copy, it's very likely you're going to see 3, maybe even 4 copies of every single card. The consistency is important because they are trying to get up to these random numbers of large attacks, and the only way they're going to do that is with a lot of consistency. A lot of their greater skills involve getting multiple attacks, so making sure to control the number of rearguards that they have on the field will be to your advantage. Sometimes, even attacking the rearguard with your Vanguard is the right call. They cannot do anything if they've run out of resources, and removing their greatest resource, their rearguards, may just seal the game for you. Anyway, that's it for me. This has been Extreme Wirehead. I hope you've enjoyed this clan intro, and I'll see you next time. Peace.